You're watching News Central now on News Central Television with me, Blessings Mosugu. The top stories at this hour. Survivors recount experience after tanker explosion that claimed about 150 lives. NLC and TUC leaders meet federal government for talks on fuel price hike with outcome unknown. Kenya's Senate opens impeachment hearings against Deputy President. We've got the details in a moment. The news begins in northern Nigeria, where survivors of a fuel tank explosion in Jigawa State have given their account of how crowds of people had rushed to collect fuel spilling from the crashed tanker before the blast happened. The survivors explained how they narrowly escaped the explosion, which tore through the crowd, killing at least 147 people. The explosion occurred around 12:30 a.m. yesterday when the driver of the tanker en route from Kano to Nguru in Yobe State lost control near Khadija University, Majia. Now, according to the police public relations officer of the Jigawa State Command, Lawan Adam, the tragedy was triggered by residents rushing to collect spilled petrol after the tanker overturned. Meanwhile, a mass burial has been held for the victims of the tragic tanker explosion.
Abin da ya faru a wannan abu da na ibtilar da ya faru da mu ni da yana gurin abin ya faru tashin wuta da yi a gurin nan ina nan komai da komai ya faru na ebi mai na kai son farko gida na dawo kenan na aje mashina na cikin gyara shi wutan nan ta tashi ina gudun tsira ta kai kowa ce makamin a lokacin wannan Allah ya ce mai kyan mashinan da suke gurin wannan ni nawa ne kaɗai Allah ya sa ya tsira da ni da shi da Allah bai sa na shi cikin wannan gurin ba bayan haka da ni ma ina cikin gurin inda wannan mutane suka ina tsaye haka bayan mutane su dan ibi ba an samu wajen minti ma 30 ma zuwa 40 ana iban wannan man ana tafiya da shi to titin ma ya bushe ba wani maganar laima ko wani abu mai daga baya kawai muna tsaye haka daidai inda mutane suka kone muna ciki kawai sai wani abu buu haka ya to gaba daya shi wuta ce
thinking that it's an ouf. They didn't know, little did they know that it is a cause of death. So some of them that engaged in fetching this fuel were caught up with the fire. In the process of taking, there is a flash of light and the place caught fire.
Now, the presidency says the absence of President Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima in the country does not create any leadership vacuum. And while Tinubu departed for the country on October 2nd, 2024 for a 2-week working leave, Shettima left Abuja on Wednesday for Sweden on a 2-day visit to represent Nigeria in bilateral engagements with the Scandinavian nation. In a statement on Wednesday, the special advisor to the president on information and strategy, Bayo Ononuga, said the two leaders are fully engaged with the nation's affairs, even while they are away. Ononuga also noted that all state organs are functioning as usual. And now joining us on the news is Elvis Asia, a legal practitioner. Thank you so much, Elvis, for joining us, and good afternoon.
Thank you for having me on the program, the news.
An absolute pleasure. Now, Elvis, can you elaborate on how the Constitution allows for the president and the vice president to be absent simultaneously without causing a leadership crisis? Are there any precedents that support this? I mean, of course, we have the Senate president, so is that allowed, basically?
Constitutionally, the issue is not really the absence of the president and the vice president simultaneously. There's no constitutional provision that bars both of them from traveling at the same time. What I'll note is leadership vacuum is a question of, for me, it's not really a question about the vice president traveling at the same time. It's about whether or not the president was right to have gone on vacation without, transferring power to the vice president in line with Section 145 of the Constitution, which makes it mandatory that whenever he's going on an annual vacation, is obligated to inform the National Assembly, and by virtue of that, the vice president becomes the acting president. In this particular instance, this president didn't do that, like we have seen in the past with other presidents, Yar'Adua, Buhari, and all that. And that is where the problem is. Unfortunately, for you to now say there's a vacuum, you also have to look at Section 145, subsection 2, which now provides that, which particularly gives the president 21-day window to do that transmission. So if it is not done within that 21 days, then the Senate can hold a meeting to appoint the vice president as acting president. But unfortunately, I think he said it's going on a 2 weeks vacation, which is short of the 21 days window. So the National Assembly will not be able to declare the vice president as acting. And so the point I'm trying to make is that, the mere fact that two of them travel at the same time is not really, it doesn't create a vacuum. I mean, traveling on a working visit doesn't mean that you have to transfer power. The Constitution only requires you to transfer power when you are going on vacation or when you become incapable of performing the functions of the office, which is not the case here. So I can't really say constitutionally that there is a vacuum. But of course, substantively, there is a vacuum in the sense that we can't really say for sure who's the acting president at the moment. The president shouldn't be able to be president while he's on vacation by virtue of the relevant provisions of the Constitution. But fortunately, we're having a situation where the president doesn't always want to give power. And substantively, like I said, even in terms of governance, in terms of presence of the president, we haven't really felt the presence of the president, even when he's here. So constitutionally, there may be no vacuum, but substantively, there has always been.
So I think that's the underlying issue, because a lot of people do not necessarily have a problem with the president and the vice president traveling out, because like you rightly said, there could be two events happening in two different places simultaneously, and that's why we have a president and a vice and a senate. But the fact that there is that vacuum, not in the sense of physical absence now, but in the sense of lack of communication and total disconnect from what is actually happening in the country. It feels as though, when the strikes are going on, when the protests are going on, it's just so convenient for the people in governance, our leaders who are supposed to focus more on those who are being governed, to just travel. So how does this public perception of a leadership vacuum and not the physical vacuum now impact the trust in government, especially when the president and vice president seem to be absent, both physically and emotionally?
What you have described really goes to the roots of our democracy. The reason why the people in government, president in this case and vice president, don't seem to really care about the feelings, the yearnings and aspirations of the people on the street who are feeling the pangs of the current economic policies of the government are facing, is simply because the people at the head do not believe that they need the people to stay in power. They believe that they can buy their way, like they've done in many places. We have seen situations that do in other places, and so they don't really give the people the pride of place that they should enjoy. They ordinarily, even when you are traveling, there should be proper communication with the people on the basis of those travels, the kind of dividends that to bring to the people. If you look at other governments across the world, you see they have a daily press briefing on, what is going on with government. And then even beyond these travels, we know that even when they are here, we don't feel the impact of governance. We don't feel the impact of the president. A president ought to be able to move around the countries, identify with the people, explain policies and visions and all of that to the people. But we don't get to see that. And so the people have come to expect, in the last few years with Yar'Adua, with Buhari, and currently with Tinubu, that, their president will not be there, which is a tragedy, which is very sad for our democracy. A president ought to be on top of the game. You must be the one communicating with the people on these issues, even though you have other, you have special advisors, you have Minister of Information, all of that. And it's really has endangered the trust that the people have in governance. And when the people do not trust government, the danger is that you are not able to really make the necessary change that you want to make, because it's fixing a problem. It's a two-way traffic. The government, has the policies. The people must be able to buy into those policies. And the only way the people can buy into those policies so that, the thing can work effectively is when there's effective communication, when the people feel the presence of their leaders. But unfortunately, we don't feel it at the moment. And so there's practically no trust in what government does on a daily basis. And that is why we are having serious issues with nationalism, serious issue with patriotism, and serious issues with putting Nigeria first in all we do. And it's very sad that we do not have leaders who understand this simple fact.
Okay, I think that another major thing which you have extensively talked about is the lack of communication. And I think that we have downplayed the essence of it so much so that people or the government does not understand how far communication can go when it comes to governing the people. So what role does effective communication play in mitigating public concerns? Because I'm led to believe that a lot of these protests and strikes may not happen if there is effective communication, if the people feel that the government is feeling the pulse of the nation. So how important is communication in governance?
Effective communication is everything in governance, particularly in a democracy, where you have, just about how many people voted to put the current president in power. So you have millions of Nigerians who are not even involved in the voting and all that. So you need to have an effective communication to mobilize the people to see the vision you say you are seeing, and then so that they can assist you. You cannot fix Nigeria by simply sitting down and saying that subsidy is gone, parallel exchange rate is gone, and all of that. Those kind of comments and statements that pulls Nigerians down, that shows complete disregard for the Nigerian people, will not help us in fixing Nigeria's intractable problems. The only way you can fix the problem is to properly encourage the people through effective communication. And in the national relation agencies, those days used to be an effective tool of communication with billboards and signs, with jingles on television and radio. We don't get to see any of that these days. What we see them do now is to defend the government. That shouldn't be the case. So if you, in the absence of an effective communication strategy for a government anywhere in the world, that government is likely not going to succeed. There are instances where you might even be doing the right things and the people will think you're not doing anything. So you must be able to communicate effectively. And I tie it, this lack of communication, like I said earlier, I tie it to the way and manner the people in government see the people. They see the people as nothing. You can go back to them, in another 4 years, buy some votes here and there, do political somersaults here and there, and then you come back to power. And so because of that, they've forgotten the primary responsibility of government, which is basically to get people to solve their problem. Leadership is not about fixing roads, about subsidy or whatever it is. It's about galvanizing the people. It's about providing leadership to people to solving their own problems. And in the absence of communication, effective communication like that, you won't be able to achieve that. And you have all these divisions. You go on social media now, you see the division that we have across the country. The mutual suspicion amongst ethnic groups. And all of these are becoming a albatross to solving our problems. And so we have to find a way to encourage government, however you have gotten to power, try to make sure that you have an effective communication strategy that would galvanize the people towards solving their problems so that we can have the country that we truly deserve as a nation.
All right, legal practitioner Elvis Asia, thank you so much for joining us on the news and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure. You're still live with us on the news. We'll go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll take a look at more stories. Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. Now, there are indications that the crisis rocking the Labour Party has taken a new dimension with the alleged resignation of members from the party. The candidates who emerged to fly the flag of the Labour Party for the local government election as councillors and chairmen are said to have been directed to resign their membership of the party and register with the Zenith Labour Party. News Central's Chinwe Ugeli reports.
The recent judgment by a federal high court in Abuja recognizing Julius Abure as the authentic chairman of Labour Party in Nigeria obviously dealt a blow on the new structure of the party. Apparently, in order to avoid suffering possible invalidation of their election due to nomination of candidates who emerged from the caretaker committee's faction, they have duly resigned their membership of Labour Party and pitched tents with the Zenith Labour Party.
We have only one Labour Party in the country, in Nigeria, and that is the one led by Abure. So there is no other.
The chairman of the Zenith Labour Party in Abia State, Prince Onukwe, in an interview with journalists, confirms the registration of new members in his party.
We prepare for the election even before the Labour people come and join us. And we determined to win. And the politics is a game of number. And that is why when they came to join us, we are happy. So that we add with additional number we have.
Although he will not give details of the new entrants, News Central TV has it on good authority that those who recently joined the ZLP are the candidates who emerged from the parallel faction of the Labour Party.
I'm not a card carrier of Labour Party. I cannot verify that this man has bought form, this man has bought form, but I can't verify. What I will verify is from my own party.
However, the national vice chairman of the Labour Party under the Julius Abure's faction, CK Igara, says the Labour Party's candidates are still intact.
We have filed the list of our candidates, and that is the much I know. We have filed the list of our candidates. If they are entering into Zenith Labour, I am not aware.
Onukwe is excited that he is receiving people into his party despite what circumstances necessitated it, and appreciates the governor for his directives.
I observed that Governor Lesoti tell them to join us because he doesn't want any people to be distracting him from the good job he's doing from Abians. So if you people observe what is going on now, you know that in the Labour Party, there is a hard problem within themselves.
The local government election in Abia State is only 2 weeks away, yet some political parties are still confused about steps to be taken. In Omaha for News Central, Chinwe Ugele.
Now to fuel price hike, the leaders of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress met with representatives of the federal government at the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation over the recent hike in fuel prices. Present at the meeting were the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, Labour Minister, Nkiruka Onyejocha, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun. Others in attendance included Mohammed Idris, Information Minister, Heineken Lopobiri, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Ekperikpe Ekpo, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, and representatives of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited. The outcome of the meeting is yet to be made public. Earlier on, we're joined on the news to discuss this development by Dotun Ojo, a public affairs analyst.
Where it was to over 1,000 naira without consultation with Labour is something that I think is not noble enough. So from here, we can peep into the hall, into the meeting table, and know that the conversation is around the fact that, we do not want to see the federal government as a betrayer. Because if we had a conversation and we had an agreement and we agreed that, we can actually settle for around 70,000 without any tampering with the fuel price, and the federal government is seemingly coming from the back door to have this increase, I think is point of concern. So I think Labour will be insistent on reversal to the old price. Unfortunately, we are not even talking about the price of petrol any longer. We're also talking about scarcity. And one of the things we're expecting is that even if it's around 800 and 900, there will be surplus of it in the community places. But it's just too tragedy of increase and scarcity. And I think that's what the conversation was all about.
In the meantime, the House of Representatives has called on the federal government to immediately reverse the recent hike in the prices of petrol and cooking gas, given the current economic hardship being felt across the country. The price of premium motor spirit, also known as petrol, jumped to 1,030 per litre, resulting in an increase in transportation costs across major cities in Nigeria. The resolution of the House praying for the intervention of the executive arm of government followed the adoption of a motion of urgent public importance moved on the floor of the Green Chamber during Wednesday's plenary session by the minority leader Kingsley Chinda and 100 others. Earlier on, we're joined on the news to discuss this development by public affairs analyst Shola Omolayo.
We want to assume that we are having a legislature that cannot back. I mean, it cannot back, they cannot bite. They are just there. Many laws, many instruction, many advice they've given to parastatals. Nothing comes out of it. Nothing. I don't see anything coming out of this. I don't see anything. And it's so insulting that we are depending on a private institution to salvage our nation in what matters so much, the primary channel that Nigeria and Nigerians are using to breathe. That is the value they place on our breath, like they care less. Jokingly, the president says, let the poor breathe. But now, the poor is not breathing. The poor are choking. Nothing is going to come out of that.
Now, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has disclosed that the state will pay 85,000 naira minimum wage to its workers, which is 15,000 naira higher than the 70,000 naira approved by the federal government in July. President Bola Tinubu signed the new 70,000 naira minimum wage bill into law in July, ending months of deliberations between government representatives, labor unions, and the private sector. Meanwhile, Governor Sanwo-Olu explained the state is not paying 85,000 naira to outdo others, but because it has the capacity to do so. The governor also revealed that the state had earlier in the year increased the salary of workers, adding that it is his wish to be able to make the minimum wage of 100,000 naira in January 2025.
Your agricultural initiative under your New Hope agenda.
Now, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, observed on the 17th of October every year, provides an opportunity to reflect on the plight of the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable populations across the world. In 2024, this day holds special significance for Nigeria as the country faces severe economic challenges, including skyrocketing inflation, widespread unemployment, and worsening insecurity under President Bola Tinubu's administration. Nigeria is home to one of the world's largest populations of people living in extreme poverty. As of 2024, over 40% of the population lives on less than $1.90 a day, according to the World Bank estimates. Now, the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olisa Agbakoba, has drawn the attention of the National Assembly to constitutional issues related to law enforcement agencies in Nigeria and factors inhibiting the government's objective of abolition corruption as stated in Section 13 of the Constitution. In two separate letters to the Senate and House of Representatives, he said the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was an unlawful organization which he believed was unconstitutionally established. The letters were addressed separately to the Deputy Senate President, Barau Jibrin, and the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Benjamin Kalu. The Deputy Speaker doubles as the Chairman, House of Committee on Constitutional Review, while Senator Jibrin is Chairman, Senate Committee on Constitutional Review. Now, a coalition of civil society organizations have condemned the recent suit filed at the Supreme Court by a group of 16 governors in Nigeria to nullify the existence of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. The coalition made this known to newsmen in Abuja, saying that the suit is an attempt to legalize money laundering and deny citizens basic social needs like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. They called on citizens to resist the move by the governors, putting an eye on the nation's judiciary before the country is destroyed.
What they are doing is not only a joke, but is something that is threatening the foundation of even our country. Because if you say that people should be allowed to loot and steal, then you have democratized and liberalize looting and stealing in the country. And we cannot be watching this to happen, because this is not what democracy stands for.
We also call for increased oversight by the Financial Intelligence Unit to continue its oversight of the funds that are appropriated and deployed to local governments to ensure strict adherence to the ruling of the Supreme Court.
We reject any attempt to undermine the integrity of Nigeria anti-corruption framework and call on all Nigeria to join us in defending the existing and effectiveness of all our anti-corruption agencies. The financial autonomy of our local government councils is non-negotiable.
Now, members of the Edo State Market Women's Association and Traders Welfare Union staged a peaceful protest at the Oba's Palace in Benin, calling for the removal of their president, Blackie Ogiamen, over allegations of corruption. The protesters accused Ogiamen of high-handedness and failing to account for 100 million naira in donated funds. News Central's Austin Azu brings us the report.
Aggrieved members of the Edo State Market Women's Association and Traders Welfare Union, carrying placards with various inscriptions, marched through major roads in Benin City, paralyzing human and vehicular movements before arriving at the Oba's Palace, where they voiced their grievances. Spokesman for the Edo Traders Welfare Union, Lucky Urukbe, called for the immediate removal of the association's president, Blackie Ogiamen, citing alleged high-handedness and failure to account for the organization's finances. Urukbe alleged that the funds in question include 100 million naira donated to the association by Senator Adam Soshomole during his tenure as governor of the state, which Ogiamen has yet to account for. With this revelation, the traders are seeking the intervention of the paramount traditional ruler in the state.
2013, Adam Soshomole give 100 million naira for market women for 3 senatorial districts for 18 local governments for a Magwero Hall. They go hand over and give Blackie Ogiamen. So now we call the ask Blackie since 2013. We never see any Benin woman, any Esa woman or Auchi will benefit from the 100 million. He said, make we go do what we want to. Say the 100 million, not be market women where they sell for market or for road, now they give. Say now and in meeting people, now they give. As we talk now, the 100 million still there with them.
Speaking on behalf of the Benin Palace Chiefs, the Onyoba of Benin, Isaac Ogwafa, assured the protesters that justice will be served while cautioning against any acts of violence.
Erezo wadon tu magwa emnori waya etio sabini kaw egwaga hebeni ne emna be uyo wage ebe pe abe kihunduwa.
Ogiamen has earlier sworn at traditional shrines, denying any wrongdoing. In Edo State for News Central, I'm Austin Azu.
Nigeria's federal government has signed a memorandum of understanding with GE Healthcare and the Journal of the National Cancer Institute to boost the capacity of biomedical engineers across the country. Nigeria's Minister of State for Health and Social Welfare during the signing-in ceremony says that the initiative will help address the dwindling number of biomedical engineers in the country and give millions of young Nigerians the opportunity to obtain degrees as biomedical engineers. The managing directors of both the GNCI and GE Healthcare affirmed the organization's commitment to training 5 students from the National Biomedical Schools of Engineering in 5 states of Enugu, Maiduguri, Edo, Zaria, and Lagos State.
Starting with really doing diagnostic studies of what biomedical engineering school needs. We've done curriculum development. Thank you, GNCI and GE, for coming to our aid, helping to update our curriculum to meet the test of time, to meet evidence-based learning. And we're doing this in a way, in a very deliberative and calculative way, to make sure that engineers that we're training really have a good background to work as biomedical engineers, and also to expand opportunity to our millions of young men and women.
As you know, sir, there are three parts to make a hospital and get quality. First, you need the right kind of infrastructure. Second, you need to make sure you have the right quality of equipment. And third, you need to have the people. And I think that the people element is so important. So for us in the private sector to be working alongside the public sector and your schools to be able to upgrade the level of biomedical engineering is so important.
We are really happy that today we are creating a path for young engineers to gain real-world experience and practical application of their studies.
Coming up on the news, Kenya's Senate opens impeachment hearings against Deputy President. We'll bring you the details after the break. Thanks for staying with us. Now, we look into disturbing investigation findings by Associated Press that look into a harrowing and often overlooked chapter of the ongoing conflict in wartime Russia. In a desperate bid to fill wartime labor shortages, young women, some as young as 16, find themselves ensnared in a system that compels them to assemble weapons under harsh and unforgiving conditions. As recruitment efforts sweep through regions like South Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and even Sri Lanka, serious concerns have arisen about the ethical implications surrounding this targeted approach, which preys on vulnerable populations believed to be easier to control. Now, joining us to discuss this is the president of General Industries Workers Union of South Africa's Mamelwe Sebi. Join us all the way from Gauteng. Thank you so much, Sebi, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, as always.
It's a pleasure. Now, I'm going to start off by asking, what are the main causes of young women from specific African nations being the target of recruitment, and what socioeconomic factors will make them particularly vulnerable to such exploitation?
It is the poverty of the African working class. And I think you just have to look what's happening across the continent when you are faced with devastating levels of poverty and unemployment, young people idling, wasting their life, being wasted away without any opportunity for meaningful and gainful employment, let alone career advancement. And therefore, when this sort of opportunities arises, it's understandable and almost unavoidable that they will seek them out, they will take advantage of them with the hope that through them, they could at least have some form of gainful employment at the same time as advancing themselves economically through earning of income, which otherwise they will be without, which in many African countries where there is not even a social protection in a form of grants for the unemployment, lack of job opportunities, employment and income, by means of which is almost a death sentence for these young people and their families.
And how does the recruitment of these women intersect with the issues of human trafficking? Because it's a very serious issue. And of course, labor exploitations. Are there certain indicators that suggest these recruitment efforts may be taking place within a larger trafficking framework?
Well, it depends on what you mean by that, because the reality is that the entire system of wage labor, it always has those elements of human trafficking, because to the extent that, for instance, here in South Africa, I mean, people through years of colonialism and apartheid, they were, dispossessed of their land and stripped of any means of, earning income other than by rendering their labor to industries from mining farms that were European-owned in the past and continue to be predominantly white-owned 30 years into a black majority rule. And in that sense, there is always element of, human trafficking, because what we have here is not people that are forced, it's people that have been lured by the prospects of income. And, adults that consent formally, but the reality is that they are forced in this situation by economic circumstances beyond their control. And I think this is an indictment on African governments that decades after independence, we still have this situation where we are a slave colonies. We are a slave colonies of big imperialist powers that could come and, take our people for wars that have nothing to do with them, for wars that are not probably even agreeable to them, and because of no any other income and, of course, job opportunities available in this country. And this is not unique to Russia. And I think is, in the context of war in Ukraine. We saw in the past year or so when, Israeli regime went to recruit, people in Malawi with the cooperations of the government in that country. And in this case, I see at least those people are being paid directly. In the case of, Malawi, the Malawi Israeli deal, you had a situation wherein it was said that actually the money or portion of the money will actually go to government. And this is the reality with many of these arrangements where African governments, like the old kings of the past, who were trading in slaves in their own people, they are selling our people to be slaughtered in wars of imperialism everywhere across the world.
All right. I'm also going to ask, what role do you think workers' unions and right groups in Africa should play in addressing these issues and advocating for the rights of these workers?
I mean, the best thing that we can do is to ensure that we fight for policies that entails an end to chronic mass unemployment and the poverty of the working class. But the problem is that the labor movement itself, who are acting as lieutenants of capitalism, lieutenants of imperialism, are drawn into structures of many of the states in enforcing neoliberal, policies that have created mass unemployment, and which in South Africa today stand at over 12 million. But the situation in Nigeria is no better. I mean, I was looking at a tragic incident where our people are dying, trying to basically scavenge on oil in an oil-producing country like Nigeria. Of course, in addition to devastating levels of inflation, the cost of living crisis, that is reality in Kenya, that is reality in Zimbabwe, and everywhere across the continent. How then do we begin to develop a program of bold demands that will do few things? One, they ensure that we have a decent minimum wages, which in the case of Giusa here, we are demanding 15,000 rand minimum wage for the workers in South Africa. I've seen that Nigerian workers movement, I think they're demanding 70,000 minimum wage in Naira for the Nigerian workers. There are similar demands everywhere across the continent. We need to be able to demand that governments must actually develop public works program. There is so much work to be done. I mean, in this country, we have a massive housing backlog. We have roads, we have clinics, and we have schools, we have massive infrastructure to be built. Yet workers in the construction industry, not only is the employment increasing, in fact, we're losing tens and thousands of workers in that industry. Why? Because of the neoliberal program that entails cuts on spending on public infrastructure, public services, and all these things and so on. More than that, we need nationalization of the key sectors of the economy. The working class must seize political power, not only through a mass political party of the working class that must stand in elections here in Nigeria and everywhere across, the African continent and the world indeed, but through a program to nationalize. And in the case, I would say of South Africa, would be mining, but also oil in Nigeria and other key sectors of the economy. Bring that into public ownership. Make sure we beneficiate minerals from this continent so that we can reindustrialize the economies in order to eliminate poverty and unemployment. That is the only way that we can make sure that people would, when they take jobs, be out of choice and a real career advancement than actually being employed as mercenaries in wars where they are actually trading their lives for imperialist objectives.
All right, thank you so much. President of General Industries Workers Unions of South Africa's Mameliwe Sebie for joining us and sharing your thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Quickly, we move on to more stories. Kenya's Senate began impeachment hearings against Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua on Wednesday, hours after a court said the proceedings were constitutional, clearing the way for a vote on his dismissal this week. And this follows the Kenya's National Assembly voting to impeach the Deputy President on 11 charges, which included corruption, undermining the government, and stirring ethnic hatred. However, Gachagua has denied all charges. He had launched a legal challenge against the impeachment proceedings in the High Court, but Judge Eric Ogola said the process could go ahead. The Deputy President was Ruto's running mate in their 2022 election win, helping secure vital votes from the populous central Kenya region. But he has since fallen out and political alliances have shifted. We go on another short break now, and when we come back, we'll take more stories. Stay with us. Tournament number 2 seed Nigeria's Quadri Haruna has been forced to withdraw from the men's singles event at the 2024 ITTF Africa Championships in Addis Ababa due to a thigh injury and fatigue. Despite leading Nigeria to a gold medal in the team event against Algeria on the 14th of October, Haruna had to pull out of his second-round match against Benin Republic's Doji Fani. With several tournaments still ahead this year, including 2 more WTT champions and leagues in Saudi Arabia and France, Haruna emphasized the importance of recovery. He will stay with the team to support the younger players and will depart Addis Ababa with them this weekend. We're still talking sports. Flamingo's captain Taiwo Afolabi named the Player of the Match award after leading Nigeria to a dominant 4-1 win over New Zealand in their 2024 FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup opener on Wednesday night. Afolabi controlled the midfield throughout the game and capped off her stellar performance by scoring Nigeria's 4th goal just 10 minutes into the second half. Nigeria's other goals came from Shakirat Moshood, Khadijat Adigoke and Faridat Abdulwahab, while Anna Saxon scored the lone goal for New Zealand. In the other group match, Ecuador scored a 2-0 win against hosts Dominican Republic. The Flamingos will take on Ecuador on Saturday, aiming to advance to the knockout stages of the tournament. Still talking sports, Al Ahly's Champions League opponents, CR Belouizdad, have announced Abdelkader Amrani as their new head coach. The Algerian club parted ways with French manager Corentin Martins just 4 games into the season after a poor start to the season, which saw them win only once in the first 4 games and 13th on the log. This will be Amrani's second stint leading Belouizdad. He took charge of the club before and helped them win the Algerian Cup in the 2018-2019 season. In his career, Amrani won 6 trophies, the Algerian Cup 5 times with 5 different teams, and the Algerian League in 2017-2018 with CS Constantine. He was also the Algerian manager of the league 3 times in 2004-2005, 2014-2015, and 2015-2016. And that's all on the news at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our major stories. Now, we told you that survivors recounted their experience after tanker explosion claimed about 150 lives. We also mentioned that NLC and TUC leaders meet federal government for talks on fuel price hike with outcome unknown. And finally, we mentioned that Kenya's Senate opened impeachment hearings against the deputy president. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, StarTimes channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Blessings Mosugu.